Ethan Cole floated in the silence of space, the stars stretching endlessly outside his tiny pod. He had been on a solo deep space mission for weeks, charting a newly discovered asteroid belt. The loneliness was heavy, but he had grown used to it. Space was quiet, predictable in its vastness, and that comfort was his anchor. Tonight, exhaustion had finally caught up with him. He adjusted his harness and closed his eyes, drifting into a rare and much-needed sleep. He didn't notice the strange shimmer forming around the pod. It started as a flicker, a ripple in the emptiness. Then it grew brighter, engulfing the pod in light. Ethan's eyes snapped open. Alarms were silent. The pod's instruments displayed only static. Before he could react, a sudden force pressed against him, a pull unlike anything he had experienced. The stars outside bent and twisted, forming shapes that made no sense. The sensation was dizzying, terrifying, yet strangely peaceful. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The stars vanished, replaced by a landscape that was alive with colors he had no names for. He was no longer in his pod. His feet touched solid ground, or something that felt like it. The air smelled sweet, almost floral, and it was warm in a way that felt comforting. Around him, towering structures of silver and glass shimmered in the light of 3 suns. He blinked, unable to comprehend where he was. Ethan Cole. The voice was soft, yet it carried through his mind with perfect clarity. He turned, heart-pounding, to see a group of beings approaching. They were humanoid, tall and graceful, with glowing eyes that seemed to look through him. Their skin had a soft metallic sheen, and their movements were smooth, almost floating. He froze. You speak English?" Ethan asked, unsure if he was hallucinating. The tallest among them inclined her head. "Your language is understandable to us. You have been chosen, Ethan Cole, by Empress Thalira." Ethan swallowed hard. "Chosen? By whom? The Empress?" His voice trembled. I don't understand. Why me?" "The Empress selects those who possess the qualities we value," the alien replied. "Your species carries traits rare in the universe. Courage, empathy, creativity. Qualities that our civilization has lost." Ethan shook his head, stepping back instinctively. "I'm just a human. I'm an astronaut. You do not need to understand yet," the being interrupted gently. "Come with us. The Empress awaits." Before he could argue, 2 of the other beings extended their hands. Ethan felt a strange warmth emanating from them, not threatening, only guiding. Hesitant, he allowed himself to be led forward. As they walked, Ethan noticed the details of the city. Towers of crystal reflected the 3 suns in patterns that looked like living art. Roads glowed softly underfoot, and small vehicles moved silently along them. In the distance, he could see gardens floating in midair, waterfalls streaming upward. Every step felt surreal, as if he were inside a dream he couldn't wake from. Finally, they arrived at a massive palace. Its gates were open, welcoming yet imposing, made of a material that seemed liquid but solid at the same time. Guards lined the entrance, tall and elegant like the ones who led him. They did not speak, but bowed slightly as he passed. Ethan felt a nervous flutter in his stomach. Inside, the hall stretched endlessly. The walls shimmered with colors that shifted like oil on water. Strange symbols floated in the air, glowing softly. And at the far end of the hall, on a throne that seemed to float above the ground, sat Empress Thalira. She was more magnificent than anything Ethan could have imagined. Her eyes glowed with soft silver light. Her hair moved as if in a gentle breeze, though no wind existed. Her robes shimmered like liquid moonlight. She looked at him with curiosity, not judgment, and for a moment, Ethan forgot to breathe. "You are far from home, Ethan Cole," she said, her voice melodic, echoing, in his mind rather than his ears. "Do not fear. You are here because your presence is needed. We have chosen you as a partner not in submission but in guidance." Ethan's mind spun. Partner. Guidance. I don't understand. I'm just an astronaut. You are more than you know, Thalira replied. Humans carry something unique. You see, we lost the ability to feel fully, to imagine, to adapt. You have these gifts naturally. That is why you are chosen. He swallowed, trying to make sense of her words. Chosen for what? For the future, she said softly. For my people, and for yourself, if you accept it. Ethan took a step back. The words were overwhelming. He had never imagined anything like this, and yet something inside him stirred. A spark of curiosity, of wonder. Could humans truly be that important? Could he, an ordinary man, be the reason an alien civilization might survive or change? The palace attendants waited silently, giving him space but also urging him forward. Ethan realized he had little choice. Resistance seemed pointless. He had to see this through, at least for now. As he walked slowly toward the throne, he looked around once more. The city outside shimmered with light and possibilities he had never imagined. His heart raced not with fear alone, but with a strange excitement. Perhaps this was the start of something far greater than he had ever dreamed. And as he reached the steps leading to the Empress, he understood a single truth. Humanity was more extraordinary than he had ever realized. And now, the universe would see it too. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt the weight of destiny and the thrill of what might come. Ethan's feet felt heavy as he climbed the steps toward Empress Thalira. Each step echoed softly in the enormous hall, though no sound seemed to come from the Empress herself. She sat motionless, yet her presence filled the entire space. Her silver eyes followed him with a curious intensity, as if she were trying to read the deepest corners of his mind. Do not be afraid, she said softly. Her voice was calm but firm, like the gentle command of a river shaping the stones beneath it. We are not here to harm you. We wish only to understand and learn. Ethan stopped a few feet away, unsure how close he should get. He had always trained for emergencies, for dangerous missions, but this was something he had never prepared for. He cleared his throat. I still don't understand why me. Why would an alien empress choose a human? Thalira inclined her head, her long hair flowing like liquid silver. Because your kind carries something rare in the universe. You feel deeply, even when logic says you should not. You create solutions. From nothing. You adapt, and in that you are powerful. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. Powerful? I'm just a person. I've never led an empire. I've never done anything important outside of space missions. That is what makes you remarkable, she replied. Most beings with power misuse it. Most beings without power lack vision. You have neither, yet you possess both potential and humility. That is why you are chosen. The word hung in the air. Chosen. Ethan felt the weight of it pressing on his chest. It sounded important, dangerous, and terrifying all at once. He had never thought of himself as special, never considered that humans might be extraordinary in a universe so vast. You will not be alone, Thalira said, her gaze softening. I will guide you and the people will watch. Learn, observe, and do not fear to act as you see fit. That is all we ask. Ethan's mind raced. How could he act? He barely understood these beings, their culture, or even their technology. But there was something in Thalira's tone that stirred a sense of purpose inside him. He was no longer just a man drifting through space. He was part of something greater. One of the attendants stepped forward and activated a floating device. In the air, holographic images appeared around Ethan, showing planets, star systems, and civilizations he had never heard of. The Empire observes the universe, the attendant explained. We seek to grow, to survive, to avoid mistakes others have made. And now human insight is part of our guidance. Ethan stared at the projections. You mean humans, can help your civilization? Thalira nodded. Your kind carries intuition, emotion, and creativity. You see patterns and possibilities that logic alone cannot reveal. That is rare among the stars. Ethan swallowed, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. Could humans really be this important? He thought of his fellow astronauts back on Earth, scientists, engineers, ordinary people who worked tirelessly, yet never imagined they were special in the eyes of the universe. Could their simple acts of courage and curiosity truly matter on such a grand scale? "Come," the Lyra said suddenly, rising from her throne. Her movements were graceful, almost floating. "Walk with me." Ethan followed, trying not to stumble, as she led him down a corridor of shifting light. Each step seemed to bring new wonders. Walls that looked like liquid reflected their images perfectly. Gardens floated in midair, waterfalls ran upward, and strange creatures moved silently through the air, observing them without fear. "You see, Ethan," the Lyra said, "our civilization has grown strong, but we have lost something essential. We are efficient, organized, and intelligent, yet we have forgotten empathy, creativity, and flexibility. Your presence reminds us of what we have lost." Ethan shook his head. "I'm just a human. I can't." "You already can," she interrupted gently. "Small actions matter. A kind word, a new solution, an unexpected approach. These are the foundations of greatness. You do not see it yet, but humans have shaped worlds before, even without knowing it. Here, you have the chance to shape one. Intentionally." The words sank into Ethan's mind. He thought of Earth, of how humanity had survived war's disaster. Ethan stood in the heart of the Xylarian palace, feeling the weight of every eye upon him. The leaders of the Empire, tall and radiant, studied him silently. Each movement he made, each expression on his face was observed with precision. The room seemed alive, as if it could sense his uncertainty. "Your first trial begins now," Empress Thalira said, her voice calm and unwavering. "It will test your mind, your heart, and your courage. Do not underestimate it. You will succeed, if you remain true to yourself." Ethan swallowed hard. Trials. He had faced danger in space, meteor fields, failing life support systems, and rogue satellites. But nothing like this. This was not about survival in a physical sense. It was about judgment, insight, and character. Glowing platform rose from the floor, and before him appeared a series of holographic simulations. The first scene was a bustling alien city under threat. A massive energy storm was heading directly for it, and thousands of civilians were trapped in the streets. Ethan's mind raced. The simulation responded to his decisions in real time. He quickly calculated evacuation routes, guiding holographic citizens to safety using unfamiliar technology. It was challenging, but his human intuition helped him anticipate problems before they appeared. As the storm dissipated and the city stood safe, the leaders nodded in approval. Ethan felt a flicker of pride, though he knew this was only the beginning. Next simulation was more subtle. A group of alien diplomats from rival factions approached, their body language tense. A small misunderstanding could spark conflict, threatening the stability of the Empire. Ethan listened carefully as the simulation replayed conversations in languages he did not know. Somehow, his instincts told him which words carried hidden meaning, which gestures indicated trust or deceit. By mediating calmly and respectfully, he averted a potential war. "Impressive," the Lyra said quietly, her silver eyes reflecting the soft light of the chamber. "You see patterns others do not. That is the strength of humanity." Ethan felt both exhilaration and exhaustion. These trials tested more than knowledge. They tested understanding, compassion, and creativity. Humans were used to solving problems, with limited resources, thinking quickly and caring deeply for one another. These traits, he realized, were exactly what the Xylarians needed. The third trial began without warning. A virtual room appeared around him, filled with alien children, crying in fear. Their homes were destroyed, their parents nowhere to be seen. Ethan's heart clenched. He could not ignore them, even if he wanted to. He moved carefully, reassuring the children, finding ways to rebuild their homes with the holographic tools at his disposal. His empathy guided every choice, and the children smiled as the simulation recognized his efforts. You understand what we have lost, Thalira said softly, her gaze fixed on him. Humans care when efficiency alone would be enough. That is why you are chosen. Ethan paused, realizing the depth of her words. Efficiency was not enough. Strength alone could not save worlds. It was compassion, creativity, and human intuition that made a difference. He had survived space missions not only through skill but through adaptability and thoughtfulness. That same human quality was what the Xylarians now needed. The final trial was the hardest. A group of Xylarian leaders confronted him in the simulation. Their intentions were unclear, their questions challenging. Each question tested not only his intelligence but his morals. How would he resolve disputes? How would he handle betrayal? How would he inspire unity among divided factions? Ethan relied on what he knew best: honesty, empathy, and rational thinking. He listened carefully, spoke truthfully, and offered solutions that considered the well-being of everyone involved. Slowly, the leaders' skepticism faded. They nodded and spoke among themselves, impressed by his ability to navigate complex problems with human reasoning. Finally, the simulation ended. Ethan felt drained but proud. He had faced scenarios more complicated than any space mission, more intricate than any diplomatic negotiation on Earth. And he had succeeded not because of superior strength or technology, but because of human traits that were deeply ingrained in him. You have done well, Thalira said, her voice gentle. You see the value of your kind. You understand what has been lost and what can be restored. That is why you are here, Ethan Cole. Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his body release. He had never imagined that humans could be considered extraordinary in the universe. Yet here he was, standing in a palace on an alien planet, and the beings who ruled this world looked at him with respect and expectation. Even so, he knew this was only the beginning. The trials had shown him his potential, but the real challenges, political intrigue, cultural differences, and the responsibility of guiding a civilization, were still ahead. As he left the chamber, he was approached by a Xylarian scholar, a being with deep blue skin and luminous eyes. You have done what none of our people could, the scholar said softly. You think beyond logic. You act with heart. That is what makes humans remarkable. Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of humility and pride. I'm just doing what I think is right, he said quietly. I never imagined it would be important. It is more than important, the scholar replied. It may shape the future of this empire. Outside the chamber, Ethan paused for a moment. The palace gardens stretched endlessly before him, glowing under the light of the three suns. He felt a strange connection to this world even though he barely understood it. The humans he had once considered ordinary, himself included, carried a power that the Xylarians had lost. And now, that power was needed more than ever. Ethan knew one thing for certain: he could not fail. Not because he was perfect, but because humans were uniquely capable of seeing what others could not, of caring when others were indifferent, and of finding solutions when logic alone failed. He looked up at the sky, feeling the warmth of the alien suns on his face. He thought of Earth, of the people he had left behind, and of the possibilities that lay ahead. The universe was vast, full of challenges and wonders, and for the first time in his life, Ethan understood the true potential of being human. Trials had tested his mind and heart, but they had also revealed a truth. Humans were exceptional not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they could adapt, imagine, and empathize in ways the universe had nearly forgotten. As he walked back toward the palace, ready to face whatever came next, Ethan felt a quiet determination. He was no longer just an astronaut lost in space. He was a human, chosen to guide, to inspire, and to show an alien civilization the value of qualities they had long forgotten. And he would not let them down. Ethan had begun to understand the palace and its ways. He had walked through the glowing corridors, observed the court's routines, and even learned a few phrases in the Xylarian language. Yet nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. He was in the palace garden, surrounded by floating flowers and shimmering waterfalls when a sudden alarm rang through the halls. The light shifted, turning a deep crimson. Guards rushed past him, their expressions tense. The Lyra appeared at his side instantly, her face calm but her eyes sharp. "They are moving," she said quietly. "The faction that opposes your presence has acted. You must come with me." Ethan's heart raced. He had known there were rival factions, but he had assumed they were cautious, waiting for the right moment. Now, action had come, and it was dangerous. They moved swiftly through secret passages hidden from the public. Ethan marveled at the palace's complexity. Walls shimmered and transformed, doors appeared and disappeared, and hallways twisted in ways that defied human logic. Yet, amid the beauty, danger lurked. "They want to capture you," the Lyra explained as they ran. "They believe your influence threatens their power. If they succeed, it could lead to war." Ethan swallowed hard. War. He had experienced simulated danger before, but this was real. He had no weapons, no advanced training beyond his astronaut experience, and yet he knew he could not freeze in fear. Humans were survivors, improvisers, problem solvers. That was his strength. The corridors led them to a high balcony overlooking the city. From there, Ethan could see the approaching threat, sleek, shadowy vehicles moving through the streets carrying armed rebels. The palace guards readied themselves, but the Lyra did not order a direct attack. "Violence is not always the solution," she said. "Use your mind, find another way." Ethan looked down at the city. He studied the streets, the vehicles, the positions of the guards and rebels. He remembered Earth's lessons. Distractions, traps, and quick improvisation could turn the tide, without bloodshed. Slowly, a plan formed in his mind. "Give me a communicator," he said, his voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. A small device was handed to him. Using it, he accessed the city's surveillance system. Light shifted in a sequence he had observed in the palace gardens, and holographic decoys appeared on the streets below. The rebels hesitated, confused by the sudden illusions. Ethan guided the palace guards in real time, coordinating movement, to block escape routes and disorient the attackers. Using his knowledge of human problem-solving, he created a strategy that relied on deception, timing, and coordination rather than brute force. The battle was short but intense. The rebels were forced to retreat, their vehicles trapped in a maze of illusions. Ethan's heart pounded, but relief washed over him. The rebellion had been a warning, but it also revealed something important. Humans could think differently. Ethan had faced danger, solved problems, and guided the palace through chaos, but the political tension in the empire was far from over. He now understood that leadership was more than bravery. It was understanding people, anticipating motives, and finding solutions that no one else could see. The Lyra led him to a council chamber where the leaders of all factions awaited. There, faces were serious, some skeptical, others curious. Ethan felt the weight of their eyes on him. The moment was tense, and any mistake could escalate into conflict. "You must speak," the Lyra said softly. "Show them what humans can offer. Do not rely on force, rely on reason." Ethan swallowed and stepped forward. He remembered what he had learned on Earth. Diplomacy was about listening first, understanding second, and proposing solutions last. He looked around the chamber, observing body language, noting tensions, and identifying points of agreement. "Leaders of Xylaris," he began, his voice steady despite the nervousness bubbling inside. "I understand that my presence here is unusual. I am not from your world. I do not hold power in the same way you do. But I have learned from your culture, your wisdom, and your values. And I believe that we can find solutions together, solutions that benefit everyone." A few heads turned, skeptical. Ethan continued. "I have seen your cities, your technology, and your people. I have also seen divisions and fear. I am not here to change your culture. I am here to offer a perspective that your civilization has not had for a long time. The human perspective. We see possibilities that are not obvious, and we act with care for others when it matters most. He paused and let his words sink in. The room was silent. He continued, choosing his words carefully. The rebellion that arose recently shows us what fear can do, but it also shows us something else. Unity is possible. We can use strategy, communication, and empathy to resolve conflicts before they become wars. Violence is not the only answer. Thought, understanding, and collaboration are also powerful tools. Ethan proposed a series of plans. He suggested communication networks between factions, shared projects for education and innovation, and joint efforts to respond to emergencies. Every idea relied on cooperation rather than dominance, on insight rather than intimidation. The council members murmured among themselves. Some were clearly skeptical, but others nodded thoughtfully. Ethan realized that humans' greatest strength, our ability to think, adapt, and care, was exactly what was needed here. A tall, blue-skinned counselor stepped forward. You speak of unity, human, but your kind is small, fragile. How can you guide us? How can you survive the dangers that come with power? Ethan smiled faintly. Humans survive because we adapt. We use our minds, our creativity, and our empathy. I do not lead by force. I lead by understanding. And that is why I have been chosen, to show you a way that your species has forgotten. Another counselor, a woman with glowing green eyes, spoke next. And what of the factions that resist? Will they listen to your human reasoning? They may resist at first, Ethan admitted. But humans also show patience. We observe, we learn, and we wait for the right moment to act. Change is not sudden, it is gradual. I can help guide that change safely so it strengthens the empire instead of weakening it. For the first time, Ethan felt a sense of hope rising among the leaders. They were not blindly following him, nor were they rejecting him. They were listening. And in listening, they began to understand that his perspective, though foreign, offered value they had never considered. Thalira stood beside him, her presence reassuring. You see, she said softly, humans think differently. They see paths others do not. They act with care when others would act with force. That is why your ideas hold power. Ethan felt a mixture of pride and humility. He was not a ruler, a warrior, or a deity. He was simply human. And yet, in this chamber, in this alien empire, being human was enough to make a difference. Over the following days, the council began implementing Ethan's suggestions. Joint projects between factions began. Communication networks were established. Small disputes that would have escalated into serious conflicts were resolved through discussion and compromise. Each success strengthened Ethan's confidence and proved the value of human insight. Even in simple ways, humans could influence the empire. Ethan showed the leaders how to anticipate problems, how to plan for contingencies, and how to act with compassion even in tense situations. His perspective reshaped their thinking, introducing a new way to balance logic with empathy. Thalira observed quietly, occasionally guiding him with a word or a gesture. You are teaching more than strategy, she said one evening. You are teaching trust, patience, and understanding. These are gifts your kind carries naturally. Ethan nodded, thinking of Earth, of the ordinary people whose intelligence, creativity, and care had shaped the world in ways often unnoticed. Perhaps this was what Thalira meant, that humans were extraordinary not because of strength but because of heart and mind. As the sun set over Xylaris, casting golden light across the palace gardens, Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction. He had navigated danger, faced political tension, and guided a divided empire toward cooperation. Each step was a reminder that humans had a unique power, the ability to unite, inspire, and solve problems in ways others could not. The leaders, once skeptical, now looked to him with respect. The factions that had opposed him were watching closely, no longer dismissive but cautious and intrigued. Change was possible, even in a civilization as ancient and complex as Xylaris. Ethan realized something profound. Humans' advantage was not in might or numbers, but in thought, empathy, and ingenuity. In a universe of endless possibilities, those qualities could shape worlds, and for the first time he felt certain that humanity, ordinary, adaptable, compassionate humans, could truly influence the cosmos. Standing beside Thalira, watching the alien suns sink behind floating gardens and crystal towers, Ethan understood that he had found his place, not by dominating or controlling, but by thinking, understanding, and acting as only a human could. The path ahead was still uncertain. Challenges awaited. Rival factions would try again, and the Empire would continue to test him. But Ethan was ready. He had discovered the human advantage, and he would use it to guide, to protect, and to inspire. For in the end, he was no longer just an astronaut from Earth. He was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of what humans could achieve, and a reminder to the universe that humanity's greatest power lay not in strength but in mind and heart. Ethan stood on the palace balcony, feeling the soft warmth of Xylaris's 3 suns on his face. The city stretched out before him, a shimmering mosaic of towers, gardens, and flowing energy. He had never imagined a place like this, beautiful, strange, and alive with possibilities. Yet, even amid its wonder, he knew the Empire had been fragile. Division and fear had once threatened everything. Now, it was beginning to heal. Beside him, Empress Thalira appeared, her presence calming and strong. She watched him with her silver eyes, a mixture of curiosity and respect in her gaze. "You have done well, Ethan Cole," she said softly. "Your human perspective has strengthened our people in ways we could not achieve alone." Ethan shook his head, still surprised by everything that had happened. I only tried to do what I thought was right," he admitted. "I didn't expect it would matter so much." "That is exactly why it matters," Thalira replied. "Your humility, your insight, and your courage, these are traits your species carries naturally. That is why you are more than a visitor here. You are a partner, a guide, and a bridge between worlds." Ethan felt a quiet pride. The trials, the rebellion, the council challenges, all of it had tested him, yet he had survived and learned. Humans were not the strongest in the galaxy, nor the most technologically advanced, but they had something the Xylarians had almost forgotten, the ability to think, feel, and adapt in ways others could not. Over the weeks that followed, Ethan continued to work with the Empress and the Council. He helped plan new strategies for governance, advised on diplomatic relations, and introduced ideas that encouraged collaboration among factions. Slowly, the Empire began to change. Communication became smoother, disputes were resolved before they escalated, and even the skeptical factions began to show respect for his guidance. One evening, as the 3 suns began to set, Ethan found himself walking through the palace gardens with Thalira. The floating flowers glowed softly and gentle. Waterfalls shimmered in the air. The alien citizens moved gracefully around them, observing but not interfering. "Do you ever miss Earth?" Thalira asked quietly, her voice thoughtful. Ethan paused, thinking of the blue skies, the oceans, and the people he had left behind. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I've come to realize that being human means adapting. We survive, we learn, and we grow. I can't change where I am now, but I can make a difference here." Thalira nodded, her expression softening. "That is why you were chosen. Your presence reminds us of what we have lost, and it guides us toward a future we could not imagine." Ethan looked around at the gardens, the palace, and the people who had once been skeptical, but were now learning to trust him. The realization sank in. Humans could inspire, even in a civilization far older and more advanced than Earth. His greatest power was not strength,